I'm going to have my impact to the world through this subject. I loved that physics has the ability to just explain the world around you on the most fundamental level.
Ahana Banerjee is a Forbes 30 under 30 lister and the founder of Clear, a social skincare app whose aim is to revolutionize the skincare industry with real customer testimonials on skincare products.
How many software engineers do you know are actually major skincare enthusiasts? So who is really going to build this? They invested at the idea stage when Clear was a 4-day-old idea and I was still a student.
What would you say is the biggest lesson that you have learned about yourself?
I'm almost numb to rejection and failure because it's an inevitability, and I've always experienced it whenever I've done anything where I've seen some success. How much does money matter to me? And that's not to say, if it matters less or more, you have a moral high ground or low ground, but just as a person, how much does this actually drive me? My skin troubles are very emotional and very deeply personal. I have the most supportive family in the world, but
how meaningful was this to you when you got nominated? Ahana, I had the pleasure of sitting down with various founders that I have sat down in that same chair. But I think you're the youngest one, which makes this episode extra special for me. You started the business by the age of 21, and just 2 years later, it's valued at £15 million, which is staggering. Before we deep dive into your business story, I want to get to know you a little bit better. How did university student Ahana look like?
Yeah, well, I started university very keen to become a physicist and pursue academia. So I studied physics at Imperial College London, and I had no intention other than to continue doing physics for the rest of my life when I started uni. And pretty much from the first term of my first year, I felt that it wasn't for me, which was actually quite a stark realization to have and gave me almost an existential crisis, because the decision to study physics wasn't something that I took lightly. I'd actually put a lot of thought into it growing up. I'd moved around internationally. I lived in India and in Singapore and in the UK. And I think, for me, it was very important that I had some kind of impact with my career. And growing up, I always thought that would be through science and innovation. And I loved that physics has the ability to just explain the world around you on the most fundamental level. And so it wasn't just I like physics and maths, so I'm going to study it at uni. It was, I'm going to have my impact to the world through this subject. And so to get to university and suddenly, number one, not enjoy it, and number two, actually not be as good at it as I thought I would be, was quite a hard pill to swallow. But it was that actually led me to trying other things, because I thought, well, if it's not physics, what am I going to do? How am I going to have any kind of impact? And so I applied to loads of internships from my first year, not necessarily because I was interested in them, but because I was worried about what I was going to do, and because I started to feel that it wasn't going to be physics. But to be very honest, I think during university, I had a deep insecurity about the fact that I wasn't going to end up in physics. And even though now I look back and, if you look at my LinkedIn, I did all these internships. At the time, I didn't feel that was success, because the narrative that was kind of around me and my friend circle and the academics was always that, the pure, best ones of us stay in academia. And so I really struggled with my confidence throughout uni. And it was really caused by the academics, because I was working so hard. And the one thing that I could never achieve were the top grades, to the extent that in my first year, I actually got a 2-2. And all of my friends were on the dean's list. They all got high firsts. I didn't even know anyone that had got so much as a 2-1, let alone a 2-2. But because I never actually failed an exam, none of my friends really believed that I was struggling academically when I truly, truly was. And so it was hard. I stopped doing a lot of extracurriculars in my first year just to try and study more and do better. That didn't work, and it really affected my mental state. So then in my second year, I picked up more extracurriculars just to try and improve my own mental health. But I think during university, because of these academic challenges, I really struggled with my confidence. And it was only after I found my passion in entrepreneurship and actually left that university environment that I became a lot happier and more confident.
You've had some corporate experience before becoming an entrepreneur. As a consultant in the banking industry and in a startup, how were these experiences useful to you to become an entrepreneur?
I think they were all incredibly useful. And I personally am just a big proponent of trying as many things as you can at somebody else's cost. And I think internships are the way to do that. And for many of them, it was figuring out what I don't like. And as much as it was about what I do like and what I want to end up doing, there were some hard skills that I took away from the experiences. The first internship I did was actually as a software engineer, where they threw me into the deep end and they were kind of like, your project's in JavaScript, learn JavaScript. TypeScript is our front-end language now at Clear. If I hadn't been forced to self-teach that summer for that internship, I wouldn't have had the technical skills to actually build my own front end, not be dependent on any other software engineers to actually get my company now going. So, in that sense, incredibly valuable. My banking jobs taught me to work in the middle of the night, maintain professionalism. And, my first investor, my pitches started at 10 p.m. and ended at 4 a.m. So in some ways, having that training of being able to perform under pressure when you're tired, when you haven't slept, that discipline, I really got through some of those corporate experiences. But I think on a broader note, also sort of from a values perspective and understanding what is important to me and what's not. All of these internships, especially because they were in different fields, taught me a lot about myself as well, about, how much does money matter to me? And that's not to say, if it matters less or more, you have a moral high ground or low ground, but just as a person, how much does this actually drive me? How much does the work I'm doing actually drive me? How much does where I'm working, who I'm working with, all these different aspects, what matters to me? And what are my non-negotiables? On the flip side, what am I not willing to sacrifice for my job? Is it my family relationships? Is it my health? Is it my integrity? There's all these different areas. And just through trying different things, meeting different people. And on every internship, I made sure to, I was that intern that would really make the most of the coffee chats and just meet as many people as I could and just ask them about their life, about their career, their jobs. They were all incredible learning experiences for me. And that's why, and that's ultimately what helped me figure out that entrepreneurship was the right thing for me. I wouldn't have known if I hadn't tried other things, also tried working in a startup. I think the startup experience was also incredibly valuable because it showed me, how do you actually go from 0 to 1? How do you build a company? But I was doing that alongside my studies and there was almost no pressure to it. It was kind of like, well, if this doesn't work, this was just a bonus opportunity that kind of came out of nowhere. But it was only through doing that job that for the first time I felt that not only could I directly see the impact of my work, which, as I said, was one of the most important things to me. I already knew that before even starting my career. But it was also, from a skill set perspective, I'm a true generalist. I like writing code. I like talking to people. I like doing the planning. And I love learning. That was one of the core values that came from these experiences. I'm happiest when I'm learning the most. And I'm sure you'll know as an entrepreneur yourself, the amount you learn as a founder is incredible and far surpassed the amount I was learning or the rate at which I was learning from the other jobs.
If I was your father, and I'm going to try to put myself in his shoes, my daughter went to one of the best schools in the world, which is Imperial. She lands some of the most desired jobs, in consulting, in banking. I mean, as a father, I can see my daughter's life super planned. It's safe, it's upwards, it has a very low amount of risk. So my advice to you would be, as a father, honey, risk things later. Right now, focus on something great that you have. Friend of mine, when he finished university, and we finished almost at the same time, and by then I already founded my company with my twin brother, he asked me, Alberto, I want to build up this business. What do you think? How should I do it? I told him, look, I think there's no better time for you to fail in your life, because if you fail at this point, you're failing very cheap because you don't have anyone that is depending on you. You don't have kids, you don't have a family that you have to support. But obviously, when you're under 30, most kids, they depend financially and economically. They have this dependency on their parents, and it's normal. So their support, their approval is very important. So his family didn't support him, and he didn't follow what I A thought it was a great idea, but B, and most importantly, he it would have brought him a lot of happiness. And then he went on a very good career, corporate path, and still today he regrets that he didn't step up to his parents. So in your case, obviously having these great academic and professional experiences, how did your family react, and did you get any support from them?
I have the most supportive family in the world, but what I will say is I didn't give them a reason to worry. And what I mean by that is I think there is a perception that it can be a huge risk to start a company and pick it over a corporate job. But the part of the story that you're missing is what ended up actually happening is I had these 2 great graduate job offers. At this stage, I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I'd proven that I was good at it from the first startup job that I did. I didn't see myself properly starting my career with them, but I knew that eventually the plan was to go into entrepreneurship. For me, the limiting factor was money. And my parents are the most supportive in the world. And they have set me up so well to be financially independent when I finished uni that was something very important to me, that no matter what happens, something that I need to make sure is true is that once university ends, I don't depend on my parents financially anymore. So I have to find a way to make that happen. And the graduate jobs for me seemed like the only path, because the thing that I hadn't done in the first startup was raise funding. And I knew to build a tech business, I probably need some initial funding to have the time to actually develop the product, get it to market, etc. And at that time, being a student, I didn't know anybody that had raised external funding who didn't have friends or family. And I wasn't in that position where I could ask my family or friends for, investment into a company. So I thought the only way to really become an entrepreneur is to pick a corporate job, ideally one that pays well, so that I can work for a couple of years, save up, and then maybe later down the line, use that to start my business. And that was my plan A, which is why I went about securing these graduate jobs. And in the end, I had these 2 competing offers. Now, our first investors were Y Combinator, and they actually invested halfway through the final year of my master's degree. So not only did this mean turning down my graduate jobs, it also meant dropping out of my degree. But the part of the story that I think is really important to tell is, firstly, on the degree standpoint, I had done an optional bachelor's thesis in my 3rd year, which meant that I could drop out of my 4th and still get at least a bachelor's degree. But on the job front, because I had these 2 offers, I played a couple of games with both companies, and in the end, they both gave me 2-year deferrals. So what this actually meant is that I had the opportunity of a lifetime when YC offered to invest. And I knew that if within 2 years the company failed, I would still have the stable job to fall back on. So from a risk perspective, it was a very measured risk to start my career as an entrepreneur. And I think that the ability to just take a risk, leave your degree, leave your job, all of that kind of stuff is entirely dependent on your life, your personal circumstances, your financial circumstances. And for me, there was always the question of, well, I need to be able to pay my rent. So if I want to be an entrepreneur now, I have to find a way to make that happen. And for me, that was securing external funding. And there were other benefits also with Y Combinator being a very well-regarded accelerator program in the tech space. I knew even just from a CV perspective, it would help me. It's not that I was starting, my company then, of course, was a no-name company, but it was backed by one of the, the biggest Silicon Valley investors, which would also help in case it crashed and burned. And so I think from that perspective, if you're my dad, I have to ask you, what are the risks? What is the actual risk here? The risk is that I spend 2 years trying something, and if it doesn't work, I go back to taking this secure job. And so I've always been very, very measured in my approach to risk-taking, and I don't for a second think that the corporate route is bad. I think that there's a lot to learn from that as well. And as I said, that was actually my plan A. But this funding opportunity is what kind of moved the needle for me, completely changed my trajectory, and literally accelerated my career by about 10 years.
If you take the example of Jeff Bezos, he was in finance, in investment banking prior to launching Amazon. And he took his boss on a walk in Central Park. And he told his boss, basically, he laid out the whole business plan and he said, look, I want to build up this company in the internet when the internet was not a huge thing back then, but it was a big bet. But he thought that there was a gap in the book space. And the answer from his boss was, Jeff, that would be a great idea and a great plan for someone that doesn't have an already fantastic job. And that's a good advice, let's be very honest. And if I was to be your dad, or for that matter, I think anyone's dad, right? You really want to keep your child safe. The advice would be the one that has the lower amount of risk. So my advice would be just follow your career for a little bit longer, that corporate path, and when you build up a little bit more of experience and you've built up some savings, then do something by yourself. And that's a great advice. But in this case, Jeff Bezos didn't follow the advice, and I mean, that's something quite unique. But in your case, it's also, and I've had also the pleasure of having other founders that they've followed similar things, that they didn't follow great advice, and they're doing great things right now. Let's talk about your company, Clear. What is it?
So we are a skincare tracking app, very similar to a period tracker or a diet tracker, except for skincare. So the idea is that you log the products you use, any medications you're taking, and you take progress selfies. We then analyze this data. So I guess the physics degree did come in helpful after all. So we look at the products you're using, the ingredients that go into them, your skin concerns, your skin type, your skin color, because that matters when it comes to skincare. We analyze all of this data and how your face is changing in your progress selfies to make unbiased, personalized recommendations for the consumer. We then use this same data when working with beauty brands. And a lot of people at that point go, oh my God, like data brands, like this sounds bad. But I actually lead with, we sell data. And here's why you should want us to. The skincare industry has historically been completely underserved by technology. And for that reason, consumers suffer because products aren't actually getting that much better. And the reason for that is that brands themselves don't know how effective products are because they don't have the data. There was no way for a brand to know in practice, in the market, if we launch a product, how is it actually affecting people's skin? The reason for that is because no brand will ever create a tracking app that lets you track another brand's product. But simultaneously, consumers don't just use one brand. I don't know what your skincare routine looks like, but I know that I use a couple of different brands in my routine, and that's the case for most consumers. And so in order to create a truly agnostic tracking app, no brand is incentivized to do this. But what this means is they have no way of knowing, are their products in the context of a person's routine actually having any impact? But when you have a large enough data set and you can start seeing the trends of, on average, users that are using this product with this skin type are seeing these results, or rather not seeing these results, you can take this data, you can work with the formulators, the cosmetic chemists in the R&D teams, and actually work to improve the formulations. So, I always tell, and especially our target customer, really young women for the most part. Of course, everyone has skin and everyone is welcome on Clear. But a lot of young women, especially if they hear that selling data, it's always like this thing that's scary. And I understand why. And I think it's very important to differentiate that we don't monetize via advertising. So we are not rewarding the company with the highest marketing spend, who can use our platform as a tool to hyper-target consumers. That's not something I believe in. And I think that defeats the whole purpose of what we're doing, which is to be truly unbiased and brand agnostic. In order to innovate, you need data. And the reason that the skincare industry has not seen innovation is because brands don't have access to the data. We're bridging that gap. So our users are actually helping themselves in the end by logging your routine on Clear, by tracking your progress, by yourself being able to have a comparison, being able to take that to your dermatologist to get these actual data-driven, unbiased recommendations. Not only are you helping yourself, but you're also helping the brands actually help you in the end. So from a business model perspective as well, it's all about using data, technology, and community to make the skincare industry a little bit more scientific.
My girlfriend, she looks, and every time we're in bed, right, she's looking at some vlog, some recommendation from an influencer, someone that is basically saying, I have the best advice, the formula to keep your skin super clear, super clean, and looking fantastic. And me being a guy, a man, having a more, I would say, simplistic view in this space, I was thinking like, why don't you just go to a dermatologist? Like, instead of spending so many hours every night just looking for the right solution, the right, answer. So why, let's say myself as a customer, as a potential customer, should I use Clear instead of going to a dermatologist?
Well, I think even with dermatology, unlike a lot of other areas of medicine, it's not an exact science. So if you go and break your leg and you go to a doctor and they fix it and you come home and it's fixed. With dermatology, of course, there's the science, there's the study and all of that. However, in practice, when it comes to giving out prescriptions, it's pretty much based off of empirical evidence. So yes, the dermatologist has done their training. They know that for acne, there are certain ingredients. There's salicylic acid, there's benzoyl peroxide, and there are gels that will, work. There are antibiotics which will work. There are vitamin A's, retinoids that can be prescribed. But the choice of, do I give this patient an antibiotic? Or, if it's a woman, do I give her the contraceptive pill? Or do I give her Roaccutane? Is purely based off of their professional judgment, which is needed, right? But that's something that can be replicated by a data set and isn't inherently more scientific. The second thing is that a lot of people think that dermatologist recommended products are like inherently superior. So if you've ever gone to a dermatologist, they may give you a prescription product. They may also suggest that you use La Roche-Posay sunscreen or this cleanser. And there are certain brands that they tend to recommend. What a lot of consumers don't realize is those brands aren't being recommended because there is some inherent dermatological benefit to them. It's that these brands have tremendous marketing budgets and advertising spends. And for these brands in particular, their main marketing channel is through dermatologists. So they're not explicitly paying dermatologists to recommend a product because that's illegal. But what they are doing is they're loading them up with a ton of samples. So the dermatologist just has a bunch of these samples in the clinic. They're familiar with them. They've probably tried some on themselves and they don't harm their skin. I'm not saying these products are bad, but they're not necessarily better than any other products that you can buy at Boots or Superdrug. But because consumers aren't educated about how this industry actually works, when they get this CeraVe, recommendation from their dermatologist, it's not necessarily because CeraVe is superior and this dermatologist has some information that the rest of us don't. It's just, it's actually marketing. And so the cosmetics beauty industry even trickles into the dermatology space. And that's also why even patients don't see results for many years.
From all these data sets that you gather, what is the biggest lesson learned? Like, is there something that we should be doing that is going to have a massive impact, or maybe something that we shouldn't be doing that, again, is going to have a massive impact if we don't do it?
I think that there's two key things that are sort of that we're seeing in our data set, and that is corroborated by dermatologists, is you don't need a 15-step skincare routine. And often, if you are putting too many products on, in fact, with too many active ingredients, it has negative effects. And this is heartbreaking because it's always the skincare enthusiasts who dedicate an hour to their skincare routine, have done the most research, spent the most money, aren't seeing the results because they're just doing way too much to the point that half the products aren't even penetrating their skin barrier because they've just put too much on. And that can often be very irritating for the skin as well. And sort of conversely, what we see is actually very effective is a simple routine. So face wash, moisturizer, and SPF. And the SPF is particularly important for people with all sorts of skin concerns, whether that's acne, eczema, rosacea, even normal skin, people without issues. It's the best preventative measure for, firstly, skin cancer, which is no joke. It's a serious...
So even if you live in the UK and there's unfortunately not so much sun going on here,
yeah,
I need to be using SPF every day.
Even if you live in the UK where it doesn't look like there's sun, you need to be using SPF every day. So actually just stripping it back, whether you're a man, woman, whatever, if you have to use one product, I will always say it's SPF for everybody. Ideally, you should be washing your face as well, especially if you live in a big city. There's a lot of pollution. Things just kind of come on your face. But having that layer of protection, not just cosmetically, will help sort of fight against the signs of aging, as they say. You know, it will protect you from UV rays, which in the long term, it's a preventative measure. It will prevent against skin cancers, but it will also just, a lot of SPFs have moisturizing ingredients, so you don't necessarily need a moisturizer. So I think just seeing it sort of stripped back, relatively simple. And there are cases where some active ingredients are particularly useful. So what we do see is that users with, for example, post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, which is this kind of dark marks you get after you've had a breakout, using certain ingredients, we do see an effect. So vitamin C, alpha-arbutin, and this does match what research has been done on the ingredients. But the problem is there is a slight disconnect between the research on an ingredient versus the actual product, because how it's formulated has a huge impact on the efficacy again. So not every vitamin C product will replicate what you see in studies with vitamin C, etc.
Is there anyone else in the tech industry doing something similar?
There are other beauty tech companies. No one is doing exactly what we are. So, and when I say exactly, I mean combining the tracking with the community. So there's also a very social part to Clear where you can find people with the same skin types, concerns, leave reviews, etc. And with our business model, there are skincare tracking apps that advertise, which, as I mentioned, kind of, I think, defeats the purpose of what we're trying to achieve. There are also apps that let you go into a shop and you can scan a product and you can see if it's got harmful ingredients. There are some just community apps. There's giveaway apps. There's platforms that give free products out for consumers to leave reviews, and that is a form of market research. So there are other players, but people often think that the industry is a lot more crowded than it actually is. And I think the reason for that is, how many software engineers do you know are actually major skincare enthusiasts?
None.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So who is really going to build this? How many want to build a skincare app?
How do you generate revenue?
So it's through the brand side, through the data partnerships. And the innovation looks different on different levels. So when it's with the large skincare companies, it's working directly with the cosmetic chemists and the R&D teams. And it's all anonymized data, but looking large scale, people using these ingredients, what kind of results are they seeing? If they tweak the formulations this way, are there any changes? It's basically running science experiments, and we're the data provider. With the small to medium-sized brands where they don't have the same level of budget, what we'll do is sort of smaller scale testing programs. So if you want to see we did a program last year with a skincare brand, Dr. Sam Bunting's skincare, and she wanted to basically test the efficacy of this line that was aimed at people with acne. So the brand will tell us how many consumers they want in the study, how long they need to use the products for, which products to use. And it ends up being a win-win-win, because the consumer has signed up for this free app. They've just, declared their own skin type, skin concerns, and suddenly they're getting, in that case, it was over £100 of free skincare from a celebrity dermatologist. It's a very legitimate, well-regarded brand. We make money off of this. We get more content. We get more data from the tracking. And the brand actually gets the insights to, is this product doing anything? And we also can help license the reviews. So if they want to use them in their marketing, etc., we make money there.
I mean, your company is 3 years old now. You're monetizing it by selling data to external parties. Was that your idea from day one?
Yes. I'm a believer in the new way of VC. I don't think that... look, the former way can create immensely valuable companies. It has. That's been proven. But just myself as a founder and my approach, as I've said, I'm quite measured in the risks that I take. And I've never been the spontaneous, let's just figure it out kind of person. I plan everything. And so for me, it was about looking at comparable companies in other industries. So what are the best period tracking apps? What are the best diet tracking apps? What are the best fitness tracking apps? And in the early days, I used to refer to Clear as Strava for skincare. And one of Strava's key business models is selling data, but data for good, helping cities plan where they should put lights, or helping know, which cycling tracks should be made a bit safer, or the road should be made better, which is great. Again, it helps the consumer by providing this data to the correct people. And Strava in particular, there's the tracking side, there's the community side. It's actually very similar to Clear, or, the wine app, Vivino. It's also got some similarities to what we're doing at Clear. And so, the data side was there from day one, but I've also got other plans which have been tested as far as monetization goes. And I made sure to demonstrate those when I was fundraising, because one challenge that I faced when raising is there is no exact comparison, right? Like VCs, a lot of them unfortunately don't have skincare routines just because of the nature of who's on the other side of the table. So they're relying on looking at, what could an exit look like here? Like, what does success look like? And they don't have a picture because there is no market-leading skincare app to look at. And so, I'll try and draw these comparisons into other companies and show them this is how you can make money. So with us, one benefit we have over Strava is people don't buy bikes every week. People do buy skincare very frequently. So we can have a marketplace element. We even launched, just as a test program, a debit card to facilitate people spending cashback, show that we can actually basically be like a loyalty rewards card as well. We'd make money on that. There's also the dermatology side of things. Currently, we've got a few features to facilitate your appointments with dermatologists as far as sharing your medications, products you're using, and your progress pictures. We could be more integrated in that process, actually take a commission, help people book appointments, etc. So there's a lot of different avenues for us to monetize.
Your story is very inspirational, very inspirational. You don't have 20 years of experience in which you have seen different methodologies or approaches on how to grow a business, and then you've implemented what you've seen into your business. And also at the same time, it's not like you've been working in the cosmetics industry for you to identify that gap or to see what are the user segments that might be more applicable. But you studied physics and you had a consulting and a banking experience, which they're not relatable to an extent. And I think this is very inspirational because the key answer to me here is that you can achieve almost whatever you want if you work very hard. I've seen that when a friend, and my friends are not going to open up with me anymore if I keep sharing their stories, but when a friend wants my opinion on how to build a business or if it's a good idea to go and build that particular business, one of the first things they tell me is, well, Alberto, I don't have an experience in that industry. I've never worked in it, but I'm really passionate about it. But I don't think I should follow it because my background is on finance and this has nothing to do with it. And then they start identifying problems that will really happen down the line, and they're very potential problems, like not 100% sure things. And they forget to take the first step because they're looking at complexities that they may happen 10 miles down the line. And in your case, you are really, an example of how that can be overcome and still succeed and still be happy, because I can see you're very passionate, and that's the most important thing in your journey, not necessarily how big your company is, how much money you raise, or how your reputation it is right now, but you clearly see that you're satisfied with what you're doing. And I think that's the most important thing when you open a business. Let's go back to the particular area of fundraising. A lot of people, especially if you're under 30 and you don't have a lot of friends that have money, or your parents.
Well, that's where the question was going to end. You don't have a lot of friends.
You don't have a lot of friends. So should you open a business without friends? So you don't have a network that you can tap into in order for you to fundraise. How did you fundraise, especially the first 6 months to the first year of your business?
Yeah, this was the hardest part of my journey, and it was also I had a lot of learnings that I wasn't expecting to learn, and became a lot more cynical in many ways. I think it aged me by a good 10 years going through that experience. That said, I was very lucky that Y Combinator were my first investors. And that initial investment, I have to say, is the 0.001 case. It's a crazy story how they invested. I applied to Y Combinator when I was just a week into working on an idea, a different idea, in fact. And that's also an interesting story because I was advised to stay away from anything beauty, lifestyle, by a VC investor who I'd spoken to before I decided to start any of these companies. And so I kind of had it in my mind that stay away from traditionally girly things because it will look bad. I don't know. So I came up with AI meeting notes idea, and that's what I applied to Y Combinator with just a week into it. And, at that stage, I didn't really know what Y Combinator was. As I said, the one thing I hadn't done for a company before was raise funding, but with everything in life, I will always just apply myself to everything and get rejected from 99 of them. But it's the one that matters. And again, coming back to those internships I did, it looks like I did a lot, and I did do a lot of internships. But what you don't see is for every one I got, there were 100 I got rejected from. Each summer, I would do about 100 internship applications, and I would get all of the rejections coming through. But I would get the one that worked out, and that's what mattered in the end. I've had this approach with pretty much everything in life, that I'm almost numb to rejection and failure because it's an inevitability. And I've always experienced it whenever I've done anything where I've seen some success. So when it came to fundraising, I didn't know anything about anything. So I literally Googled like how to raise money for startup, and Y Combinator was one of the first hits. So of course I applied without really doing much due diligence on what it was. And I did this for maybe the first like 10 pages of Google results. So I don't know who has my personal information, but I submitted my, company idea to all sorts of dodgy websites. And then the rejections would be rolling back. Even from my own university had like a small like £50 grant to do some user interviews. Got rejected from that. So when I say I wasn't expecting it to work out with Y Combinator, I'm not saying it to be humble or anything like that. Statistically speaking, I had been rejected from literally everything that I'd put myself forward to. Investors, no VCs were taking me seriously at that stage. At that stage was 20 years old, physics student, no big names with anything startup related on my CV, and no connections. And a lot of investors only take warm introductions, and I didn't know any investors. And so wasn't having much luck at all. Long story short, with Y Combinator, when they interviewed me, what ended up happening is the night of the interview, they were like, look, we like you, but we actually don't like your idea. So we want to talk to you again in a week, come up with something better. And it was actually in that week that what is now clear I came up with. It was 4 days before the interview. And I just thought, what have I learned from the companies that I've tried, from the first startup I worked in and from this meeting notes one? And the first thing was, let me try and solve a problem that I've experienced.
Hell of a week, by the way.
It was also my last week of term before Christmas at uni. I had all of my master's thesis deadlines. I remember it so vividly. The second interview was the 18th of December, 2020. I didn't sleep for that week. I time blocked every hour of that week. From this time to this time, I'm brainstorming an idea. And I didn't have a backup plan. Even though my heart wasn't in this meeting notes thing, I had picked it. I knew I had this interview with Y Combinator. So I was just like, let me just focus on this, get as much done. And I did make quite a lot of progress in a fairly short amount of time on that business. There were also many things wrong with that business. So I was terribly afraid of pitching it to Y Combinator, but also they had accepted me to interview on the basis of that application. So I didn't really see how I could change it. So it was almost like they gave me a gold, Willy Wonka card of we know you don't want to work on this. Show us what else you can do. But at the same time, building a company in 4 days is not a trivial exercise. So I just thought, what can I do here? And so, as I said, I time boxed every single hour. This time I brainstormed. This time I'll build a landing page. This time I'll beg and plead everyone I've ever spoken to sign up for it. This time I'll build a demo. That's how I'd planned that 4-day period. And I did it. So it was when I was brainstorming, I just thought, what's a problem that I really understand? And what is a solution that I'm actually equipped to build? Because that was a major problem with my AI meeting notes thing, is I'd done introduction to machine learning. This was, pre-LLMs, ChatGPT. It was a tough technical problem to solve, and I was not qualified. I also didn't really care about meeting notes summaries. So I thought, what's a problem I care about? And what can I actually solve better than anyone else? And so it was literally just writing down, what problems do I have in life? Most of it was university related. And then I thought, well, my skin is a massive problem. Is there a solution here? And I was like, well, it's very difficult to know which products to use, whether they're working. I have 100 spreadsheets logging the products I'm using, all these Google folders with my skin pictures. I've got an app to track my period. I've got an app to track my exercise. I've got an app to track my diet. Why do I have 100 spreadsheets to track my skincare routine? And so it really was a eureka moment of, I think there's something here. And of course, the exact implementation of the app has changed with user feedback, etc. But the core vision of making it easier for consumers to figure out which products to use and whether they're working has stayed the same from December of 2020. And then I pitched that to Y Combinator. It was all very abrupt. They were like, okay, batch starts in 2 weeks, incorporate a company in the US, open a bank account. leave your degree. See you then. Do you have any questions? And that was the first investment I received, which is a crazy story and was a very unlikely thing to happen. And in that case, it was because in those 4 days, I managed to come up with the idea. I built a landing page. I got 300 signups to the waitlist for the landing page. I managed to do 60 in-depth user interviews with skincare enthusiasts from various Facebook groups to gain a load of insights about the industry. And I built a prototype and managed to do 4 user interviews on the night of the actual interview itself.
Mm-hmm.
So I had made a lot of progress. And I think that's what they were looking for, is just, wow, she can actually get stuff done, which has always been what I'm most proud of, is that I can execute well. And so they invested at the idea stage when Clear was a 4-day-old idea and I was still a student.
Most of the entrepreneurs that I've interviewed, they share a commonality, which is that they built a company for which they would have been the perfect customer. And that's also your case, which I think is I think is very interesting, because when you're looking at building a business, and this is something that also happened to me, you first look outwards. So what gap can I fill in the market, rather than inwards? What do I care for? What do I stand for? And then see how I can implement that in a way that can be successful. You've had a hell of a week in which you needed to come up with idea for Clear. And perhaps we should have an independent episode about that week, because there's so much that we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's expand on why this is important to you. So why did you end up having, coming up with this particular idea and not anything else?
Yeah, well, my terrible skin is the short answer. I have dealt with skin issues pretty much since the age of 12 until now. Honestly, age 24 is the first time I've had clear skin since childhood, basically. And, for me, my skin troubles are very emotional and very deeply personal, especially as a young woman growing up in the age of social media. There's already a lot of comparison as far as, when it comes to appearance and things like that. And what's really sad is that in the years that I was suffering were some of the most exciting years of my life. When I was 14, we moved from Cheshire to New Delhi, which was a huge move. And, especially being of Indian origin, there was another layer to it. Went to an international school, met people from all around the world. It was an incredible experience. And then 2 years later, moved to Singapore, which again, like completely different country, amazing life experiences, met people from all over. I was so self-conscious and upset with how my skin looked. I didn't let anyone take pictures of me. And I have no memories documented of those 4 years on all these adventures, because I wouldn't let people take pictures of me because of how self-conscious I was about my skin. And to be honest, now, like from the few pictures that my mum took against me, where I'm scowling because I was upset with her for doing it, it wasn't even that bad. It was a lot worse in my head than it was in person or from what others could see. But I was so used to seeing filtered faces on social media that I had lost touch of what normal skin looked like. And so I actually uninstalled Instagram after a point, and I made it my own point to say that if I ever do something with technology, it will be for good. And that time I thought it'd be through physics and academia. But now on my app, for example, the product is built such that you cannot take a filtered photo. Your progress selfie, there is no way to upload something you've taken from your camera roll. Users have asked for it, but that's one piece of user advice I won't listen to, because I don't want any chance of anyone uploading a filtered picture to our app. It defeats the purpose, and part of the community is normalizing it, because that's what I wish I had had when I was growing up, to actually see somebody else with a blemish, because I just hadn't. And so I think that was one part of it, just from kind of the emotional side and the day-to-day experience. And it's also small things, like you feel embarrassed to leave the house. You don't want to go to the gym with you have to wear makeup to cover it up, and it's not a pleasant feeling. You feel like people are noticing it, staring at you. And my skin issues have been bad even while building Clear. And there's that added insecurity of, oh my gosh, I'm building a skincare app and this is how my skin looks. What will people think?
As an entrepreneur, you can get moments like that, right? That are very gratifying and is reinforcing and packing you with the confidence for you to keep going. But at the same time, as an entrepreneur, you can have very, very low moments. Mm-hmm. It's that roller coaster of, different emotions. In my journey as an entrepreneur, the biggest lesson learned, I don't think it's perhaps like this business principle that I can apply into I don't know, my business or a future business that would set that company for success. I think my biggest lesson learned is that I got to know myself very well. And I personally believe that that is something that can be very powerful. In your case, what would you say is the biggest lesson that you have learned about yourself?
For me, I have, with time, come to realize that there are three things. The thing that is most important to me are my closest relationships, my family, my boyfriend. The second most important thing, which I also came to realize the hard way, is my health, is the second most important thing. And the third most important thing to me is my career and how I have an impact. And I think being able to define these values and live true to them, and also importantly, identify what I can live without, I think has helped me a lot, because I do believe there are some sacrifices that I have made. Of course, with this amount of working, there are some things that I've massively cut back on or stopped altogether. I used to have a rock band at uni and in high school. I love music. I just don't have time for it anymore. And actually, I'm okay with that. You know, I can be a rock star in my 40s and 50s as time. You know, I love video games, actually. Like, I was an avid player again through university. I can live without League of Legends. It's okay. You know, I like friends. You know, I do, like most people, like hanging out with others, but it's just something that even when I've cut back on, I've actually been okay without. Whereas at times I have sacrificed my health. During fundraising, for example, I really was working ridiculous hours, not moving a muscle, not cooking like any meals. It was bad. And it took its toll on myself physically. I was falling ill constantly, and that was taking time out of my work and in the end making me less productive because I was unwell. And I just thought, I'm at that stage, I was 2 years into my career. I have a long career ahead of me. I cannot work like this because I will not be here to work like this if I continue. So for me, that was a real wake-up call, that even in the most stressful times of work, I need to maintain my physical health, which will also help my mental health. But I think because of the way I am and the way I respond to stress, mentally, I have always been quite resilient. But for me, the physical symptoms of stress show before they do mentally, meaning I don't get very anxious or visibly stressed in the way I come across, but it's more deeply it's a physical thing. So I need to take care of the physical side also to make sure that the mental never ever gets even close to the point of being unsatisfied. And then, as I said, the family relationships are the thing that I have never sacrificed and I'm not ever willing to sacrifice on. As I said, I've got the most supportive family. They've supported me from day one. They've been the ones who've always believed in me, believed I could do this. There was never a shred of doubt in their mind, which I think has given me immense self-confidence in my abilities to do this job, because I have never doubted myself. And I think it's, the way my parents raised me and my brother, we were always allowed to question things, have debates. I always felt heard as a child. And I think that's given me the confidence to do what I do now, and they're my biggest supporters. And no matter how busy my life or work will get, I will never sacrifice time with them. And I've realized that with these three things, and then also there is my work, which is incredibly important to me, as we've been discussing. And I genuinely feel so lucky that I get to do what I do now, even in the worst times of my job. I always ask myself, let's say, I've just had to fire someone. It's not pleasant at all. It can be emotional. It's not a fun part of the job. Even in those times, I ask myself, would I rather be doing this and have this negative part, or have done something else? And my answer is the same every time. I would always rather be doing what I'm doing. And I think it's such an incredible opportunity that I not only get to build a company, but I get to build this company, which is so personal to me, has such scope for impact, combines my love for skincare and beauty and for tech and data.
You were awarded the Forbes 30 Under 30 award, I would say, or you were included in the list. For some people, this can be very important, meaningful, and it can also help your business in one way or another, perhaps in fundraising, acquiring, in your case, maybe some users. How meaningful was this to you when you got nominated?
I mean, of course, it's incredible recognition. It's a list I'd heard about, but to be honest, was so far from. I didn't think I would make it. Like, it wasn't even on my radar of milestones. And I still don't really know who nominated me. Like, it wasn't in the plan. You know, I know a lot of, it's a great thing for PR for a lot of companies. And in that sense, it's helped us for sure, like with sort of more like business visibility. But it wasn't a planned or strategic thing. So it all happened very randomly. To be honest, when I first got the email, I wasn't sure that it was like a legitimate opportunity. But as we've established, I have no issue responding to things that seem a bit shady on the internet and giving my personal information out very freely. So, you know, it came as a huge surprise. But I was with my family at home when I received the news. And I think it was more seeing their reaction to it, because I think, like, with this job, the accolades, of course, are great, and it feels nice to be recognized for the work you're doing. But that's only the result of everything that's come before it. People, you know, recognize like the Forbes or the Y Combinator, or you've raised this much funding, or you've hit this much valuation. But that's the result of all of the work that I've been doing behind the scenes, which is my day-to-day experience. And for that reason, that's what I optimize for, like the happiness that comes from the day-to-day rather than accolades and achievements. So I have to say, like, personally, obviously I was happy, right? It was great news. It was a massive surprise. And seeing how proud and happy my like family were was really, really nice. And from a business perspective, it helped in some facets. It was more on the business side. I would say that our target customer doesn't really care that much about the Forbes list. You know, people with teenagers with acne aren't really, you know, that's not something that comes to mind too much. But as far as investor interest went, there certainly was a bit of an influx. As far as business partnerships go with brands, it helps open the door. You know, it gets your foot in the door. It's a great piece of branding, credibility. And I think, as with any accolade or name, it's hard to quantify exactly how much it's helped, in the same way that my university name probably has helped with things in life, or having the backing from Y Combinator or other big investors has probably helped open certain doors. I think Forbes was another one of those that it can be hard to quantify specifically which doors it's opened, but I do know that it has added to the general visibility and credibility of the company.
The aim of our show is to share real stories, incredibly real and valuable stories like yours, so you can inspire someone to embark on their own and build up a business if they want to, or just maybe change something in their lives. We get exposed so much, in my opinion, in today's world, to a definition of success that might be very unhealthy. So we only see in Instagram, for example, the few consequences of success, which could be fame, money, status. But no one is really showing what it takes to arrive to that, which is the real journey, because it's usually it lasts far longer than achieving the target, right? So you need to know where you're getting yourself into. So this also comes with how people define success. I don't think success should have one singular definition, but I think when you're looking at maybe venturing on your own, you should define what success means to you, and then perhaps add those values into the business, right? So it doesn't necessarily maybe mean making lots of money, or maybe you don't have to change the world, right? Maybe you just want to change your world. So in your case, how would you define success?
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that my opinion has changed on, I think, in the last year, to be honest. Before, it would be through hard targets that I would set. So it would be like, I need to raise this much investment, acquire this many users, have this growth rate, this retention metric. And what I found is I was never happy, because as soon as you hit one milestone, you set the next. Even, you know, when I closed my funding round, it sounds like it is a lot of money that I raised, but there was no celebration. It was straight into, well, now I have to hire someone. And then it was all this stress and like, how do I find the right person? And how do I do HR? I need to make a holiday policy. You know, all these things that it was immediately back into business mode. And there was no real enjoyment or basking in the glory of achieving the target that I'd set out. And that's something that I can certainly do better on, is celebrating the wins. But to be honest, like, by that same token, there are so many wins. Like, I genuinely love my job. Like, even if I have a user interview and they've loved the app, that is a win. And I'm fortunate to experience that quite frequently. So I also don't think it's like that realistic to celebrate every single win, because part of the nature of doing such having the privilege of being a founder is that you experience a lot of wins, just as you experience a lot of lows. And so what I found is that by associating my happiness with these outcomes, I am by definition setting myself up for failure, because my milestones keep shifting. The goalpost keeps moving and I'm always wanting more. And I don't think that leads to happiness or deep down satisfaction. And I think that because of that, what success now looks like to me is actually living true to my values on a day-to-day. As you said, the journey is what you experience the 99.9% of the time, and the accolade or the milestone is the 0.01% of the time. And so if I'm optimizing my life for the 0.01%, that's idiotic, right? Because that's the absolute minority of what most of my life is. And so as cliche as it sounds, I genuinely need to enjoy the journey. And to do that, the way I can do that is living true to my values, because not every day will be fun. Some days there will be tough days at work, but I come back to those three values, those family, health, and work. And even if it's not been a fun day, as long as I've prioritized my work, it's been a successful day. I have very drastically changed my view on what success looks like. And I'm much happier. And to be honest, since having this shift in mindset, I feel that success has also come more easily, because when I've enjoyed what I'm doing, I tend to be better at it.
Would you say you're successful?
Yeah. Yeah, by my new definition. But this is the thing, by my old definition, no. Because old me would have said that, firstly, getting into Imperial to study physics was success. Then I achieved it. Then getting these internships was success. Then, it was like, well, now I need to get the graduate job offer. Then it was, well, now I need to start a company. Then it was, well, now I need to raise funding for the company. But I've achieved all those milestones. So by that definition 5 years ago, I'm incredibly successful. I've achieved more in the career sense than I thought I could. But then was I waking up every day out of bed going, gosh, I'm such a success? Obviously not, because for me, I'm still thinking, we have more targets to hit at the company. And all of that still exists. Don't get me wrong. I still have the company goals. We set milestones that we need to achieve. But if I keep thinking in this way of there is always something more to achieve, which there always will be, I will never be truly content or satisfied. And I don't need self-loathing to be successful. I think that being happy, being content with your life, for me, drives me more than it deters me. I don't need to feel bad or feel like I need to achieve in order to keep achieving.
There's a lot of people that at some point in their lives, they wanted to open a business and they've seen the complexities of what that means. And they start building counter arguments in their heads. I don't have the right experience. I maybe don't have the best idea. And they talk themselves out of doing what they want to do. In your case, you definitely started incredibly early, which a lot of people can think that is very risky. At the same time, you didn't have a one-to-one experience to what you're doing right now. And despite these two counter arguments that you can have in your head, you still went for it. You are clearly successful. And you have identified also what is your definition to success at such an early stage in life, and you define yourself as successful, which it is very much correlated to happiness. So thank you for sharing your story. It's been an incredible morning, and I hope to have you again very soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation.